All right, what's up? What's up? What's going on? What's popping? So this is part 2 to the live that I did earlier today, as far as who created hip hop, and I still stand on what I said, that the main mastermind to the genre and culture that we now call hip hop was created by a Jamaican immigrant known as, hold on for a minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. But like I said, I still stand on that. That a DJ by the name of DJ Kool Herc was basically the main mastermind behind the creation of the music genre slash culture slash art form that we now call hip hop. But does that mean that he's the only person involved in the creation of that art form? Of course not. Of course not. Was it a whole? Of course not. In reality, if anybody has ever done the history of hip hop, like I said in my last video, it was a consortium of different people who were from or born and raised in the Bronx section of New York City that was involved when it comes to the creation of the music genre and culture that we now call hip hop. I mean, it's common sense, it's common knowledge. And if you guys understand now, we all know that hip hop did not come from no damn Jamaica. Excuse my language. Not to insult the island of Jamaica, but we know that it did not come from the island of Jamaica. Therefore, when rappers Busta Rhymes and Pete Rock made that claim was false. We know that hip hop music was born in the United States. It is as American as apple pie, and it was born in New York City in the streets of the Bronx. But like I said in my last video, right, or in part 1 to this video, you have to understand the demographics of that specific area where hip hop came from, especially in New York City, where a large portion of so called black people are of Caribbean descent. Thus, you have this dynamic within New York City, and a lot, not only New York City, but different parts of New Jersey, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, the District of Columbia, where you have African Americans and people of Caribbean descent living in the city neighborhoods amongst each other, as well as Latinos, or as well as people of Latino descent. Well, that's the demographic that existed in that area of the Bronx that continues to exist today. And people within, and though people, of those demographics that was living inside that community, they had to look for an escape from all the harsh realities of life. It was all sorts of crime at that time. The crime in New York City was extremely high. The danger, the level of poverty in these areas of New York City, especially of the South Bronx, was extremely high. So you had a group of people that was looking for an outlet, an escape, to escape the harshness of inner city life, and also to find a way to escape the criminal realm, or as a way to prevent themselves from entering the criminal realm. And they formulated the music genre called hip hop, right? And there was a whole consortium of different people. What is that so hard to understand? And peace to man of tomorrow. You know, peace to man of tomorrow, and peace to everyone else in the comment section. He made a great statement. He said, "This is why ADOS and FBA serves no purpose but to divide." Good statement. That whole political ideology. People who co-sign that ideology are like the main ones responding to the claims that Busta Rhymes and Pete Rock made about hip hop come from Jamaica. But then what they doing, is they try to combat one lie by using another lie to try to remove DJ Kool Herc out of the conversation as far as who created the music genre. And that's just as wrong as the claims that Busta Rhymes and Pete Rock made about hip hop coming from originating from another country. So what you're doing is combating one lie with another lie, or because you so influenced by this political ideology where you think other groups of so-called black people is somehow trying to steal something from you. This is what a lot of people who co-sign with this ADOS and FBA movement talk about. And because they have that bias, they want to then talk about hip hop and rewrite history and try to remove DJ Kool Herc from the history books. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not going to let that shit happen. I'm not going to let that shit happen. But of course, going back to what I said about the founding fathers of hip hop, there were other people. Like I said, it was a whole consortium of people who came together to help create the genre, right? You had people like Lovebug Starski, rest in peace to him. I think he passed away in 2018, where he was the one who actually invented the name hip hop. And this is what you can call an African. He was of African American descent, or what some people may now consider to be ADOS. You also had what's this other brother name? Busy B. He's another person who's of African American descent, who's what you now call ADOS or FBA, who was a founding father of the genre also. So why can't we accept the fact that when it comes to the pioneers of hip hop music, that it was a combination of so-called black people of different ethnicities? Because once again, that is the demographics of New York City when it comes to its black population. A large percentage of its black population is of Caribbean descent, is of Latino descent, as well as African American descent. And these are the people that came together to create this genre of music in New York City. All right. But then you have the Afrika Bambatas of the world, who I think Afrika Bambaataa, I think his family's from Barbados or something. And then you also have Grandmaster Flash, who's another hip hop pioneer. And his family is from Barbados. So you had that Caribbean element there as well as the ADOS element. What is so hard for people to just accept that? Why is it that people have to come to this extreme by saying that hip hop was entirely made by people within one black ethnicity, when the reality is the place where hip hop was created was home to so-called black people of many different ethnicities? You know what I'm saying? If we want to talk about the breakdancing, part of hip hop, because remember, hip hop is a combination of DJing, MCing, b-boying, aka breakdancing, and graffiti and fashion, right? So when you want to talk about the breakdancing and b-boying component of hip hop, dude, the Latinos had that on lock, as well as people of ADOS descent, as well as people of Caribbean descent, but especially the Puerto Ricans. When it came to breakdancing, also when it came to graffiti, the Puerto Ricans had that on lock. So we cannot say that it was just one specific ethnicity that was responsible for the creation of the genre. And you know what? But in reality, who gives a fuck which groups of so-called black people was responsible for creating hip hop? Shouldn't we take pride at the fact that hip hop has now is a culture that was created by so-called black people that has now influenced the world, which shows how powerful so-called black people could be if we come together? That's what really matters. That it's a black art form that was created by black people from the inner city and is now has influence over the whole entire world. Instead of sitting there arguing as far as which groups of so-called black people really invented hip hop. Was it African Americans, Jamaican Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, Dominican Americans, Trinidadian Americans, Haitian Americans? Which, nigga, the shit is black. It was created by black people. All right. But the thing is, when you go by historical documentation, all roads lead to a man by the name of DJ Kool Herc having the first hip hop party in 1973. And Kool Herc, whose real name is, or government name or birth name is Clive Campbell, was an immigrant from the island of Jamaica. Now, does that mean that that hip hop was created in the island of Jamaica? No. Hip hop was still created in America, in the United States. But one of the main masterminds of the genre, even though, like I said before, there were plenty of pioneers, but one of the main pioneers was DJ Kool Herc. History points that out. And I'm not going to go against what history has documented. I'm not. Unless if someone has undisputed evidence of DJ Kool Herc not being the main mastermind of the genre we call hip hop. Until that happens, my argument still stands. Well, history still stands. It's not even my argument. It's actual history. But once again, who gives a fuck which specific groups of black people is responsible for creating the genre? The fact of the matter is something is something special that so-called black people created amongst the many other things that so-called black people created in history, which shows the genius of our people. It shows the high level of creativity of our people. That's what really matters. And and once again, like I said, it shows how influential our people are once we put our minds together. All right. And it's not only so-called black people from one part of the world that's highly influential. Black people all over the world are influential and have been influential to the world. And for somehow on the internet, it's so difficult for people to accept this because they want, because some buy in to this FBA and ADOS ideology. When the FBA and ADOS ideology, I'm saying the main people that created that shit, in my opinion, are a bunch of fucking agents anyway, who is utilizing those movements to create division amongst so-called black, to create more division amongst so-called black people, and focus less on what their goal was supposed to be, which was to fight to get reparations for black Americans. I mean, how many of these individuals who are supposed to be the leaders of the ADOS and FBA movement are going toe to toe with members of Congress demanding reparations for the descendants of American slaves? But instead, they're coming online, accepting your donations, and just speaking about how it's a conspiracy, how other groups of so-called black people are conspiring to just marginalize African Americans, which is a bunch of bullshit. Come on, man. Although, don't get me wrong, there are other groups of so-called black people who have an ignorant belief of African Americans. That that element exists amongst other groups of so-called black people. But to go as far as to say that other groups of black people, because I've heard these statements among others, that other groups of so-called black, like so-called black immigrants, are trying to replace African Americans. So-called black immigrants are trying to marginalize African Americans, and a lot of people who buy into that thinking are getting themselves involved in a hip hop conversation and trying to remove Kool Herc from the history books and trying to rewrite history. And like I said, this conversation, and like I said in part one of this video, this conversation about who was the main mastermind of the music we now call hip hop has become no different from the flat earth argument, where people are arguing a point that they have no documented proof of. They just want to argue against the grain, just to argue against the grain. And to me, that's fucking stupid. That's fucking stupid. But that's all I have to say in regards to this topic. A Jamaican immigrant was the main mastermind in the music genre / culture / art form that we now call hip hop. Deal with it, nigga.